Hey everyone, it's Erin, and today I'll be trying to replicate this somewhat ominous piece of concept art from Disney's 1951 Alice in Wonderland, painted originally by Mary Blair. I have lots of colors, plus all these almost empty whites. I have my brushes, my water, and I'm starting with the background as always, working my way forward. And mixing together this pale lime that I had because I'm almost completely out of white. I need to go and pick up some white gouache. I just added a little bit of black to that pale green, which was a mistake. I should not have added any black at all because by adding that black, I'm ultimately desaturating the color, but I'm creating a shade of this green, and the background is quite bright. You can also see that I'm shoving a bunch of this yellow back in the tube because I realized I didn't need that much, and gouache is expensive. And I'm just going to shove it back in there. I don't care. I don't want to waste gouache. Using cyan, which is a cool blue, and I'm using a little bit of water at a time, slowly adding the water because you cannot take water away. So just slowly adding it, mixing until I get to that nice creamy consistency. And look, speaking of creamy, I'm using a little bit of a traditional gouache in leaf green, or was it leaf green or true green? Anyway, green traditional gouache. You could see it was more oily, and now I'm putting a little bit of emerald so that it's a more vibrant color because I added that black, which was a mistake. But yeah, the traditional gouache has an oily binder, and you can reactivate it once it's dry. So that's the beauty of traditional gouache. I use acrylic gouache because acrylic gouache doesn't reactivate, and so it's easier to layer. I find the colors are also more vibrant. This surface, I don't know if any of you can tell, but it's not illustration board. This is matte board, which is more porous. It's a little more absorbent and a little bit closer to watercolor paper, which is what I wish I had used, because look at this background. You can see the wet on wet technique is being used. We've got colors sort of bleeding and blooming and blending into each other. So I tried to add as much water as I could to the black without ruining the layer underneath, and just trying to get as close as I can to that effect. So I'm tilting my matte board, attempting drips, trying to get some drips in there and some more spontaneous marks. But I mean, I think I do an okay job, but I definitely would recommend using watercolor paper. A hot press would be good, so it's a bit smoother, but just so that you can get that wet on wet effect. Yeah. But I love this piece. I love the background. I love how strange it is with these colors we're using now. A red violet mixed with a lot of white and a little tiny bit of black here to create the base coat for the mushrooms. So I didn't necessarily have to do a base coat, but I kind of thought, well, why not? I mean, yeah, it was a waste of white now that I think of it. I'm like, I'm running out of white, but I make this like somewhat arbitrary background base coat. But anyway, it does, I guess, help because you don't need as many coats of the red violet that's going to go on top. And this red violet is almost directly out of the tube. I think I added maybe a tiny bit of the darker color, which I made by just adding black. I made a shade of this red violet. I should mention right now while I'm doing a few coats of this, and I dry these coats, by the way, using a blow dryer. I finally got around to like using a blow dryer, which helped because today my challenge was to do this very quickly. I wanted to do this entire piece in under an hour, which is what I did. I did it in about 40 minutes. But while I'm working on doing multiple coats here, I wanted to say, yeah, this piece, I chose it because it's, well, I'll talk more about why I chose it later, but I will start by saying I found it very moody. Just the atmosphere is strange, and I love the use of green for the sky, and then that black detail, that wet on wet, very dreamy. And then this red violet. So the color scheme of this whole piece is close to being triadic, which is, or it could be considered tetradic as well, like two sets of complementary colors, but it does have this slightly this sort of tense feel to it using that purple and green, which are complementary when you're using a red purple, which is what we're doing. That red violet is complementary to a sort of a more yellow green. But yeah, and then there's yellow. Then we've got the yellow of Alice's hair plus the blue of her dress, and all of it just, yeah, creating this very atmospheric kind of uncomfortable feeling. But there's harmony in the discomfort of this piece. And right now, I think we could all use a little bit of harmony in the discomfort of the world. So yeah, back to the painting. We are now doing the coat that's the shadow of the underbelly of the mushroom. Can we call it the underbelly? Where the gills are. But yeah, yeah, it's just the same red violet mixed with a little tiny bit of black to make a shade. And there we go, just sort of perfecting that shape. So yeah, the challenge of doing this whole piece in under an hour, in 40 minutes, was partly so that it's easier for people to paint along with me. I've had a few people now request that I do these sort of longer videos that aren't sped up as much. So in order to do that, it's easier to do pieces that are quicker to paint, because this is only sped up just a little bit. So this way you do get to see the process closer to real time. And then it doesn't take a lot of time to do this yourself, and it's also, you know, limited palette, which helps as well. And I'm going to just talk through some of the interesting facts that I learned about Alice in Wonderland. I'm always learning new things about these movies, which is great. So I'm going to bring in some now, because I'm just basically doing the black details, which actually I will mention that these dots were so fun. This is a great example of using the shape of your brush to create a mark, sort of like a stamp, rather than painting or drawing a shape and then filling it in. It's just it's a smart, economic way to paint, and to also get some uniformity in your mark making. And we'll talk more about that when I do the plants, because it really comes through in that process. But so something I thought was interesting that I found out was that originally Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, was hired to write the script to adapt Lewis Carroll's original story into this movie. And I can't remember how many pages he wrote, but then Disney was like, this is way too serious and literal and much too intellectual for the intended audience. So that idea got scrapped, and then a bunch of other people worked on it. It's a list too long for me to go through now, but so that was interesting. And the other thing that I thought was fascinating was that there were over 80 characters in the original story by Lewis Carroll, and a bunch of them got cut from the movie. There was a griffin, there was Humpty Dumpty, which, like, was Humpty Dumpty originally, that came from a nursery rhyme way before this book was written, right? Like, I don't know, let me know if you know in the comments below. But and also the Mock Turtle, which kind of sucks because I love a Mock Turtle, and also the White Knight, which was Disney's favorite character. And the White Knight was the one kind character that was nice to Alice, but Disney wanted Alice to do everything on her own. He didn't want someone to come along and help her out. He wanted her to be independent. So that's pretty cool. All right, let's talk about using the brush to create a shape. These plants are such a perfect example, and although with this plant I kind of bung it up, I don't do a great job, but I'm getting the hang of it. I'm sort of getting the rhythm of it, and then it really shines through in the next few plants that I do. But let me talk through this process. I created a greenish black that has a bit more water added to it, so it's smooth. And then with the brush, I've got a number 2 brush here. I press harder when I want there to be a thicker stroke or a thicker mark. And these maryblair plants, and I'm actually going to, right now, I'm going to add in a little screen grab, because I watched this scene that this concept art ended up becoming, And as Alice, right after she's talked to the plants and the flowers sang to her, she's walking through the forest. She's now tiny. She's all miniature, and she walks through these plants that are so Mary Blair. They're exactly these plants, and these ones here, you can see how pointy the ends are, and that's really this whole technique of pressing down on your brush to get a thicker stroke and then easing up on that pressure and sort of flicking your wrist or just stroking away very lightly and creating that fine tip. And it is a rhythm thing. You get into the rhythm of it, and then you get a more uniform mark coming out of it. But it does take practice. And I'd recommend practicing on a separate piece of paper first and just getting the feel of it. But I think it's this one I start to get the hang of it, or maybe it's the next one. It takes me a few tries. But yeah, so it's like thin, thick, thin. So it's light, then heavy pressure, and then light pressure, and a little bit of a flick at the end there. Yeah. Love it. But yeah, Mary's work for Alice in Wonderland, and I have mentioned this in other videos, but her concept art really dictated the look of the movie. It really created this way more whimsical feel to it. The colors were so much brighter and more exciting than, let's say, Bambi, where the colors were very desaturated. This scene, I feel like if they had leaned into Mary's look a little more, it would have been even cooler than it was, because you can see that the colors were a little bit more desaturated, a little more naturalistic. But yeah, her work really does shine through in this movie, in the plants and in sort of these little decorative flourishes here and there throughout the whole film. Very cool. There were like 750 artists that worked on Alice in Wonderland, and for her work to shine through so clearly, it's just sort of testament to her creativity and her unique vision. All right, putting in some of these little silhouetted pieces and lots of blades of grass, and it's just kind of a slightly chaotic scene, or not chaotic, but there's a lot going on. And I'm just bringing up here a close-up of her plants, and you can see how it really goes from thin to thick. There's quite a point, little swords. Those leaves are so great. And then, I'm starting to get it. At the very end there. I don't know, not really. Who am I kidding? I'm no Blair. Oh well, anyway, it works out, it looks okay. But next we're going to paint the hookah, which I sort of forgot to do originally. I forgot to do it when I did the mushroom, should have done it then, but that's cool, I'm putting it in now. What I do forget to do is I forget to put the, like the bowl. Do we call it a bowl when it's a hookah? I know, bongs have bowl. How do I know about bongs? I'm from Vancouver, British Columbia. We learn about it in school, elementary school. No, just kidding. Yeah, they bring in a bong and they're like, okay, we're going to learn the parts of a bong today. But with the hookah, the part that sticks out and it has the bowl that you put the tobacco in, I forgot to do it. So, oh well, that's okay. We're now mixing up the blue for Alice's dress, and I'm going to be using, oh no, we're not. This is the plants that are sort of a light turquoise color. So there's these plants. And again, we're working from the back forward, right? So Alice is one of the last things I paint because she's sort of in front of, well, she's in front of everything. So we'll do that after. But I've got pale green, I've got cyan. I put a little bit of the sort of lighter mixture that I had for the base of the mushroom, which I shouldn't have used because it does desaturate it a little bit, and end up doing a second coat with a slightly brighter, more vibrant turquoise color. And I do that by adding just a tiny bit of white and emerald green. So, but I think these ones turn out better than the other ones I've done, and especially this one. This one really, I think, was really successful. And there are a few moments during this process where I was so pleased with myself and it felt really good. And I think it's so important for anyone. I mean, I'm going to say especially artists, but really for anyone to recognize when something is successful. You know, we're beating ourselves up when things don't go right, but I'm definitely in the practice of patting myself on the back when I can, because yeah, it helps. It helps, and that's it, period. It helps. But yeah, look, much better, much brighter. Yeah, that looks good. Um, so we're going to get into, yeah, these last details here. And then, oh, can you hear there's a crow outside my window? It wants peanuts. Once you feed a crow, they remember. But yeah, I'm painting the caterpillar now. So here's why I chose this piece. I'm going to try to be as vague as possible. But so I was looking through all of my collected pieces of Mary's work, and I was looking through them yesterday, and it's, you know, been quite the week, and I see this mean, sort of scary looking caterpillar with this weird flip of hair, what looks like hair, this sort of comb over thing. And the caterpillar is kind of this like somewhat grotesque. I don't know. The caterpillar is like scary, but also there's a lot of good to the caterpillar. But in this case, during this very strange week, I see this piece and it's ominous and it's sort of surreal. It feels like, is this really happening? Is this a nightmare or is this real? And then I see this sort of flop of like comb over caterpillar head, and I thought this is resonating for me. So I chose to do this piece. I do try to choose pieces that are, you know, in theme with what's going on in the world or the holiday, and this just felt right. This caterpillar also kind of reminds me, and I've said this in a past video when I painted the caterpillar. I'm going to apologize to my dad. My dad will never watch this, but he kind of reminds me of my dad, you know, because he's a little bit like hard to understand, intellectual, little confusing, ultimately trying to be helpful, but just pisses Alice off. Anyway, it's a funny scene. You know, she comes across this caterpillar who's very into like recitation and grammar, and he's like over enunciating his words. And the whole scene is pretty humorous. I just rewatched it today, and I love the way he says correctly. In my memory, it was that he rolled his R's, that he was like correctly, but it's actually correctly. And then he says exactly, and it's very charming. Anyway, doing a little bit of dry brush, getting that little flick on the top of his head done correctly. And then, yeah. In this scene, he's got like the anger face, because he does have a very short temper. Again, similar to my dad, he seems calm and cool and collected, but then you say the wrong thing, you hurt his ego, and boom, tempered. No, I'm sorry. We're getting too personal. Have I mentioned that you should like and subscribe? This is a good time to say if you like my channel. Also, I'm teaching private Zoom classes making replicants like these, and the classes start in a few weeks. They're super fun. It goes for 6 weeks, 2 hours every Sunday night. If you're interested, check out the link in my description. Where do you find the description? Below. I'm painting Alice's dress, and I didn't feel that this was very successful. And the reason is because Mary was a genius at gesture. She knew how to sort of tweak the hips or the feet or the arms or the hands in this way that was subtle but also over exaggerated, so you really get the sense of what the character is feeling through their gesture. And Mary was so good at that, and that's a nuance that I would like to pay more attention to, because I often rush the gesture, I rush the figure. It's the one part of the painting that I'm most intimidated by, so I tend to rush things when I'm scared. In this case, I rushed it, and then Alice doesn't look as animated. And isn't that interesting? For, you know, for animators, they really do overemphasize gesture so that things look more animated in animation. What do you know? The hair in this case, I think, was successful because what I did is I mixed white and, was it white? It might have been like a pale blue or something, but I mixed it with yellow, and then I put a lot of water into it, and you can see it's quite streaky. But what happens is those streaks, when I put on the more shadowed version of the yellow over top, the shade, those streaks end up making the hair look more realistic. So that was a happy accident. Love a happy accident. I'm thinking of all those people out there who were told they were happy accidents. There we go. Second coat looks good. And to make the shade, the darker color for her hair, I just add, what do I add? I think a little bit, tiny bit of black. But now we're doing her adorable apron. Is it a pinafore? Is that what we call that thing? Let me know in the comments below. Is it a pinafore or is it an apron? Either way, it's adorable. And in fact, one of my all-time favorite Halloween costumes, which I do talk about in another episode, was dressing up as Alice for work one day. And I had this incredible blue dress that was from the 50s. It was exactly like her dress. I had the little apron, I had a blonde wig, and I had the stockings, the little tiny black shoes. And I was like all day long sort of frolicking around work and walking in tiny little footsteps. Like she has this very delicate little quick way of walking, and I was doing that all day. I was probably driving everybody crazy, but it was a lot of fun. I really like to embody the character that I am for Halloween. Yeah. So yeah, just putting in a few coats of the white, and I can tell that this is acrylic gouache because it's not going on as smoothly as the traditional gouache, which I will be using for the smoke in just a moment. Remember to always let that first coat dry completely before you start on another coat. You will risk picking up paint and getting, more clumpy finish, which you really don't want. There you go. I was talking about the scene and how he over enunciates the caterpillar, and ultimately he kind of freaks out because she's concerned, that she'll never grow again. She's only 3 inches tall, and she mentions how horrendous it is to be 3 inches tall, and he sort of loses it because he's 3 inches tall and he's insulted, so he has this temper, and she runs away or she leaves all mad. But then he calls her back, and he's turned into a butterfly, and he gives her good advice. He tells her to eat the mushroom so that she can grow again. And so the mushroom that he's sitting on, as it turns out, is literally a magic mushroom. It turns her big again. So that's pretty neat. Smoking on a magic mushroom. I love how psychedelic this story is. It's great. But yeah, and he asks her through the whole thing, he's like, who are you? Who are you? And I feel like that's so philosophical as well. Just this whole scene is great. Okay, here we go. Everyone, this is the best smoke swirl. I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased with myself. Check this out. Just go for it. I had to dip back into my paint a few times, but I don't even think about it. I just do it. And where the dry brush happens and the stroke itself is just, I love it. I think it's beautiful, and I think it's, again, because I wasn't thinking, I just went for it. And hesitation is not your friend in this case. I'm so sorry that the top is cut off here. I really had a hard time seeing where I was filming. My new setup is a little, I have a new setup, and it's a little bit, well, it's new. It's new to me, so I'm figuring it out. But yeah, this swirl, this swoosh, because I didn't hesitate, the gesture of it, the energy of it works really nicely. And then I could just make areas more opaque adding her cute little bow, and then we'll do the shadows and details on the face as well. Unfortunately, while doing his face, I forgot to do his mouth and the lines around his mouth, like the creases that go, you know, sort of beside his cheeks around his mouth, which really add to his face, like to hit the emotion on his face. But oh well. These black lines worked out really nicely. These gestural calligraphic strokes. Shoop. Some sound effect in there. Me unsuccessfully trying to whistle. Yeah, this is the piece, everyone. It was a fun one to do. I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. Definitely love these swirls that I did, you know, no hesitation, and getting better at knowing what kind of pressure will result in what sort of line. So there we have it. And the final little plant here, I think this is the last thing I paint. Yep, and we're all done. So thank you so much for watching. I did already mention like and subscribe. Let me know if there's a piece of concept art you'd like me to try out, or a specific artist you'd like me to try out. And I hope you're all having a somewhat decent week, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks for watching.